With the intent to support early years practitioners to embrace diversity, it is important to develop an understanding of the big roles of early years professionals in dismantling all acts of discrimination to truly achieve inclusion. This presentation will talk about disablism and ableism and present the reasons why these are barriers to achieving genuine inclusion, particularly in the early childhood sector. There are two categories to define disability by Cologon and Mevawala of 2023. The first model is the medical model that describes the disability as an impairment or caused by an impairment. Other terms for this model are tragedy model or charity model because it views the disability as tragic, which solicits charity and pity and considers the person as broken. From this point of view, to fix the person is the response and solution, and change that person to fit in based on society's standard. This model does not view the role of society in disabling people other than exposure to biological and environmental risks. On the other hand, the social model defines disability as imposed by society like people, structures, and institutions. This model suggests that society and not the person should embrace the diversity of people that live within it. Thus, it gives people access to services, a basic human right. Cologon redefined disability as a social response to an impairment, which later shifted understanding and created opportunities to redesign disabling environment. Finkelstein of 1995, as cited in Cologon and Mevawala 2023, also refers a disabled person as someone who cannot fully participate in society. This model emphasizes that disability is a problem created by society and not within an individual, needs a political response, and is influenced by attitudes, physical and social environments. Disablism and ableism happen at various levels, individual and even at the institutional levels, that create a negative impact on an individual. They are both discriminatory but have different emphasis. Disablism is a form of discrimination against disabled people. It includes the use of hurtful words and actions that affect the self-esteem, confidence, and security of a disabled person. It possesses restrictions in the form of environmental and economic barriers such as access to a building, the use of public transport, or even access to the curriculum. According to Cologon and Mevawala of 2023, barriers exist in the earlier setting, such as barriers preventing the use of a building, facility, or environment, the lack of alternative communication strategy or mechanism, barriers to participation due to the absence of modified equipment and translations materials. Ableism is another form of discrimination that gives favor to non-disabled people. From this point of view, ableists believe that impairment of any kind is possible to cure and eliminate. Ableist attitudes create multiple barriers to inclusive education. Various researches detail examples of exclusionary and discriminatory practices such as providing separate classes or activities for a child who does not fit instead of developing adjustments to facilitate inclusion. This is mentioned by McCartney and Morton of 2013 in Cologon and Mevawala of 2023. Another is stereotyping and considering disability to be abnormal and labeling interactions as abnormal if they do not fit with the typical description of a normal person. Inclusion is conditional on the category and severity based on the problem within a child. It is an optional policy that schools, teachers, and providers can choose to accept or ignore instead of recognizing it as a basic right. Viewing special teachers are for special children and believing that all children are capable of learning except those with disabilities. Believing that children with disabilities and impairment are disruptive and will interfere with the learning of other children in a learning environment. In addition, perceiving that children with disabilities require more time, money, or attention compared to the deserving and normal children, and that may pose a risk to hamper the development of children not labeled disabled. And having the assumption that someone is less competent if a child with a disability does not move or talk in ways like normal children. Practices in the early childhood setting. In an interdisciplinary research and dialogue conducted by Simeonidou et al. In 2022 about the inclusion of children with disabilities in early childhood education, they highlighted policies, teacher education programs, and discourses that are preventing inclusive education as follows. 1. There is a continuous exclusion and segregation practices despite efforts to move to inclusive education. Inclusive policies are contrary to the commitment of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Policies stating the legitimacy of special school attendance and special mainstream schools, but at the same time, teacher education programs still highlight knowledge on impairments and individualized learning in setting, practicing segregation instead of inclusion. Ableist thinking still continues to project children with disabilities as unable, problematic, pitiful, and a burden to their families and to the society as a whole. The same paper mentioned an analysis of disability discourses that develop over time. The analysis describes that educators see children with disability as a burden, fear of disrupting the learning of environment who are normal, and fear the embodied object, which is referred to as a body that is often rejected, looked down, or as seen as inferior. Element 3.2.1 of Quality Area 3 of the National Quality Standard of the Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority specifically provides direction on making both indoor and outdoor spaces inclusive to meet and support every child's needs. It should cater for the needs of diverse children in terms of ages, interests, backgrounds, cultures, and abilities to eliminate barriers and discrimination. Early childhood teachers and educators can design their inclusion practices and enhance the experiences of children. For example, adjust the height of equipment to improve access, designate an area or space for children's downtime and relaxation, move items to ease accessibility, and provide a well-balanced mixture of structured and unstructured experiences. The ASIQA also identified 7 principles of a universal design of learning, or UDL, that apply to the physical environment, an education framework that relates to inclusive education. The principles are equitable design of spaces, a wide range of flexibility to accommodate children's preferences and abilities, easy to understand layout and design, designs that communicate information to children in different forms such as pictorials, tactile and verbal, the absence or low occurrence of hazards, low physical efforts, and appropriateness of size and space. The Inclusion Support Program of the Australian Government Department of Education itemize a checklist of barriers and strategies that require early childhood education and care settings to complete. It categorizes barriers specific to children, educators, parents or guardians, physical environment, program structure, and supervision of children. Strategies to eliminate these barriers include the access to appropriate language resources, bicultural support, toileting, and adjustment to structure and activities. Other strategies included pertain to address professional development, staffing, flexibility of activities, and more. Most importantly, the Disability Discrimination Act of 1992 protects children and others from all kinds of discrimination based on ability. It specifically requires children's education and care services not to discriminate children and families because of disability. Speak to families in creating adjustments to improve access and participation and ensure to create a difference in the lives of children. And lastly, relevant agencies such as the National Disability Insurance Agency has this scheme that provides education, early childhood education, the approaches to provide the right support to children with developmental delay. Families have access to NDIS funding for interventions, therapy support, or behavior. This is based from the National Disability Insurance Agency. The importance of language in promoting inclusivity. The advocacy of freedom of speech is common knowledge. One has the right to express thoughts and ideas in what we call the free world. But using the right language in the right context might need more refinement as it has the power to affect the lives of others. Language in the context of people with disabilities that comes with respect and in a professional way is inclusive language. It emphasizes the worthiness and dignity of people and not magnifying the person, the abilities, and the preferences. Language continues to evolve, and disability rights movements led the formulation of laws and policies that shifted the focus of society. People with different disabilities prefer different languages. The person fit or identity first language is a discussion that is what is more appropriate to use. Some people want to view their disability as part of their cultural identities, but in reality, words like dumb, lame, crazy, that relate to physical and mental disabilities are common in everyday communication, posting microaggressions to concerned people. Be conscious and sensible in using the proper language that is deemed proper and respectful. Use of deficit-based language when documenting a medical assessment, but it does not limit the use of strengths-based language. On the contrary, it is a respectful way to use strength-based communication when communicating with the person with disability, in creating advocacy, and while in a setting that promotes empowerment. Inclusion is a basic human right. It is everyone's responsibility. As an early childhood professional, the use of appropriate language to the children, to parents, to colleagues, and the community as a whole promotes inclusion. Respect different perspectives of disability and recognize that each individual carries a different context, beliefs, and attitude. By doing these steps consistently, it is one step closer to a genuine inclusive education. In terms of pedagogy, acknowledging plurilingual pedagogies has a major influence on children's learning as it makes up their identity and sense of belonging. If educators acknowledge and demonstrate understanding and find ways to create opportunities to express themselves.